Hey there guys, Smith here from Into Maintenance coming at you today. I'm going to show you how to change out the sway bar links, the front sway bar links on this 2007 Ford Expedition. Got into a bit of a fender bender the other day and ended up pitting a guy into the wall. It was completely 100% on him. Insurance is paying me out, but I'm going to go ahead and swap the sway bar links that got damaged and broken during that incident. I'm sure to get that done. Stick with me. Got to get some maintenance done. Alright guys, now to remove your sway bar links, generally what you should need on this particular vehicle is a 11/16 socket, deep socket, because you're going to have the nut at the bottom of a longer head. So even 11/16 wrench or 11/16 deep socket. You can use a socket wrench and then various size vice grips so you can actually grab onto the sway bar link when we get down there. I'll show you what I'm talking about. And then in case all fails, which guys, this is more of a difficult job, I will say this is an 8 out of 10 because 8 out of 10 times you're not going to be able to just use hand tools due to rust, due to life. The sway bar link actually swivels. It's on a bit of a smaller ball joint and it's very hard to grip onto to stop it from swiveling. So when you're working that nut off, the whole thing tends to swivel. It's a bit of a bear, a bit of a pain. So I'll call this an 8 out of 10 job just because we're going to have to upgrade to a power tool at some point in time. So I already have my angle grinder ready to go so I can just go ahead and cut through the bolt and save myself the headache. But if everything goes well, we'll start doing it the right way. We'll start doing it the way that we possibly can by using a vice grip to hold the swivel part in place, and then use our 11/16 to work the nut loose. Some sway bar links, there's a hex key at the top you can hook onto. There's other various ways you can jack onto, each vehicle specific, but on this particular 07 Expedition, normally use a vice grips, 11/16, but then you bust out the angle grinder. So we'll see if the mechanical gods are in our favor today. First step, as always, don't worry about that there and that dent there. I'll do a video about that later. I got in a car accident the other week. The other guy was 100% at fault. When I'll show you how to pull a dent out of a car door pretty simply, and how to remove scuffs to get this thing looking back to normal and pocket all that money the insurance is going to give you. But once you get the vehicle jacked up safely, we remove the rest of the lug nuts and tires. And you guys have seen me jack up vehicles many times. I just wanted to show you this. Sometimes what I like to do, depending on how rusted the frame is, how soft the frame is, how old the vehicle is, or if my jack just isn't tall enough, you can use 2x4s. Make sure you use 2x4s of a good quality. Don't use any cheap scrap wood you got lying around, okay? You can use those to either put underneath the jack so that's level and a little taller, or on the jack head itself. I like to use it on the jack head itself because it also helps protect the metal. Instead of having metal on metal, that's a really small point for all the weight of a vehicle to be sitting on. No matter how new or old the vehicle, that's a lot of stress for that one point to be handling. So I always like to use wood to help disperse the weight, disperse the energy, and jack the vehicle up. When you go this route, again, make sure you have good quality wood. Make sure you still have a jack stand to set the vehicle down to after you jack it up. And then make sure your wheels, guys, are both pointing in the same direction, instead of being all cockeyed or anything. That way, when you're jacking it up, the vehicle is going to want to slide forward with the vehicle as it brings it up. That way it keeps it safe and stops the wood from falling out. Guys, now once your wheel is off, when you come down here, this is what we're looking for. This here is our sway bar link. That whole bar right there, this is your sway bar. This allows the vehicle, when it's making a tight turn, it forces more contact. The bar will bend. It's connected to the other side, comes over to this side as well, driver's side, the passenger side, so that if you're putting more pressure on one side of the car, it forces tire contact with the front end and the other side of the car, so you don't get like a weird wheel off the ground type situation. So it helps keep you more stable. Now your sway bar link here, as you can see right here, is broken from that car accident that I was involved in. The guy made my wheels come off the ground. I'll post the link to the actual video of the dash cam from another driver, but actually caught the front wheels to come off the ground and actually snapped to my sway bar link here, made it come disconnected from down here, this little ball joint situation. So what we're going to do is loosen up this bolt at the top of here, and there's one same size right underneath here as well that connects to the bottom of that joint. But what you're really going to need is a different varying sets of vice grips. Because it is on a swivel, because it is on a ball joint, when you go loosen this up, the ball part is just going to spin. So you're going to be able to lock on and hold that in place while you move that bolt. All right, once you have your socket wrench in place, it took me a 11/16. I use a deep socket so I can get it past the head of that bolt onto that nut. I lock down my vice grips as tight as I can, and you can just slowly work it back and forth. Hold on to the vice grips as well. Angle this a little better. Hold on the vice grips with one hand. I'm balancing the phone on my knee, so I apologize for the weird view. And just work it back and forth. You can always add some WD-40 or PB Blaster to the nut to loosen it up. If you have an impact, it might make this a lot easier as well, because you can just go ahead and zip that nut off. But take your time, go back and forth. Try to keep the vice grips end from flopping all over the place, because if it bounces into something, it'll lose its grip. You might end up stripping out the surface you're trying to grab onto. But take your time. Again, PB Blaster, if you want to soak it for 20, 30 minutes, let that soak in. Take a wire brush to it, clean off any rust. But this is something you can do by hand. Just takes a little bit of time and patience. We'll work this top nut off, and then we'll work on that bottom one. Guys, side note, when you get to a certain point when it's loose enough, as you can see down here, the silver part, this is where my vice grips is hooked onto. It's hard to see because of the protective sleeve on the ball joint that comes up, but this is actually a, get my camera to settle up, this is actually a flat spot for a actual box wrench to go onto. And so my vice grip starts slipping, so I'm switching out to an 18mm box wrench. I'm gonna hook that on the best I can right down there. And that way when I rotate, the box wrench is actually going to rest against the knuckle here, so I can just focus my power and strength on rotating that socket wrench and getting the rest of that nut off. Alright guys, hit a bit of a snag with the top one. My wrench wasn't working anymore. My vice grips had stripped it out pretty severely. Where's it at? Here it is. Stripped it out pretty severely, so I had nothing else to latch onto. So what I had to do is break out the angle grinder, guys. Sometimes in life, you got to break out the power tools. Makes life a lot easier. So I broke out the angle grinder, and I loosened it up where I had enough space there. I was able to get underneath there and grind it off, because that sucker wasn't moving any further. I couldn't get that nut off anymore. Had nothing else to grip onto, so I took the angle grinder to it. The bottom one, because the link had already broken off and left the ball joint exposed, I was actually able to get pretty good surface contact. My vice grips is still stuck on the bottom one, so I was able to get that bottom nut off without too much issue. That one just sat up there. Thankfully, I was able to really get a good grip on that ball joint there instead of relying on those tiny, hard to grab onto flats there. And I was able to just wrench that nut right off. Now all we do is grab a new sway bar links and do the reverse. Put it down, nut on, put it up, nut on, and good to go. Alright guys, I want to show you my new style of sway bar link here. Now this is a completely different style and design, and it should make removing the sway bar link in the future, because it is a wearable part, a lot easier, because instead of having that silly wrench flat on the bottom that's hard to get to, it has a bolt that goes all the way through. So we have one bolt head at the top and one nut at the bottom, not two, a nut at the top, nut at the bottom with some weird wrench flat that's hard to grab onto, no surface area. This one is all sandwiched together using washers and spacers. So what I'm going to do is a grommet and a washer is going to be on the top side here, and then a grommet and a washer will be on the bottom side, and I'll have the nut that already has some gasket on there to help hold it in place on the bottom, and then this separating rod will go in the middle, bolt, washer, gasket, grommet, washer, and then the bolt at the top. That way you can hold on to the bolt head at the top, work the nut at the bottom. Should make life a lot easier than it was. Should remove the need to ever use an angle grinder again in the future. Alright guys, so I got someone else working the camera for me right now. I got my son helping me. So what I'm going to do is I disassembled everything, right? We had washer, grommet, washer, spacer, washer, grommet, washer, okay, in that order. So I got one grommet, one washer in place. I'm going to slide the bar through the top here, like so. Get my other grommet, and make sure that the nipple, the pointy end, goes into, faces up or down, so it's actually touching the sway bar link. Then I get my spacer, and then I'm making a nice little sandwich here. Spacer there. Whoop. Almost forgot one of my washers, because you want the washer to make contact with the spacer here. Then we go washer again, grommet, and slide everything down in there. And then our final grommet underneath with the washer underneath, and then finally our nut, and then we tighten everything down. As soon as I find out where my nut rolled off to, we'll take care of that. And guys, that was way easier. Now on the bottom, it's still a 11/16, the same original socket we used to try to get off the other one on the original sway bar link, but on the top for the actual bolt head, it's a 9/16. And guys, that was just such a godsend. I'm glad I bought these particular style sway bar links. It was only $17 for a pair, which is pretty convenient to be able to have to avoid ever breaking out the angle grinder again and deal with the stupid swivel head style sway bar links. So we don't have to deal with swivel head anymore. The grommet will take the place of that. And honestly, if these get me a year out of it, I could really care less, because one, it's my beater truck. I'm not doing much off-roading, but I will be off-roading. But more importantly, I can just swap these out. I won't even have to jack up the vehicle in the future. It's so easy. I can just reach over the tire, crawl underneath, reach over and just work my angles. Wouldn't even have to jack the tire up. This makes life way more convenient, guys. So we go ahead and got that one jacked down. Now all we gotta do is reinstall the tire, jack up the other side, do the other side, and we're all done. And guys, I'm over here on the passenger side because this one was also broken, completely broken in half out of both ball joints. I ended up using an impact just because I showed you how to do it with hand tools on that side, so I'm making my life a lot easier so I can get to hanging out with my kids today. When you're doing your second sway bar link, once you get the other one tightened down all the way, the second one, it'll be harder to move the sway bar. You'll still have some play here. So what you'll have to do is set the grommet and washer in first, feed everything else in, and then shimmy it over place so that you can drop the bolt down. Now when it comes to actually the bottom part where you put the grommet, washer, and the nut in, you'll only have a little bit of room for the nut to actually work on there, so make sure you're taking your time. You don't want to cross thread it, you don't want to strip it. What I did is I took a second jack that I had and I placed it underneath my knuckle here, just so I can get a little bit of spring compression. I'm still resting on my jack stand over there for safety, but I just want just enough compression that I was able to finger tight the nut on there, and now I can take my tools to it and it'll help wrench it down, which will pull this down, make everything nice and tight. So that's just a pro tip. Toss a second jack under there if you got one to add some compression. Otherwise, you have to go to the other side and loosen it up a little bit. That way you have a little bit more play, and then tighten them both down in the very end. Alright guys, that's how I swap the sway bar links on a 2007 Ford Expedition. Common symptoms for a sway bar link going out: you can hear some bumping going on as you're driving, some knocking going on. Sway bar links, they're usable parts, wearable parts, you gotta swap those out. If you are going to bust out an angle grinder or a blowtorch or a sawzall to cut through it to make life a lot easier for yourself, because sometimes you have to. Rust, corrosion gets in the way, you gotta do what you gotta do. Like I had to today, bust out the angle grinder. I'm sorry I didn't show you that, but that's very difficult for me to record while I'm using an end grind at the same time. But if you are going to use an angle grinder, guys, safety first. Make sure you didn't just do an oil change. Make sure there's a pile of oil on the bottom side of the engine or laying on the ground, shop rags, cardboard, gas, anything that's flammable, because blowtorch, angle grinder, sawzall is going to throw sparks, it's going to throw a lot of heat. We don't want to catch ourselves on fire, guys. So safety first. As always, like and subscribe, drop in the comments or questions below, and I hope you guys find a minute out of your own day to do some maintenance. We'll catch you next time.